Okay, good afternoon. This is Amanda Erickson. I want to thank you for joining us for the COVID-19 Global Disruption Update. So many things are changing and happening on a daily basis, and keeping with it all is pretty challenging. So just a note, these slides are updated as of yesterday, March 30th, with regard to what we're understanding about changing legislation. And just in case we're viewing this at a later date, things may have changed. One thing also to note is we are recording this session. So if you do not want to participate in a recorded session, please exit the recording at this time. I would like to also take a moment and share that we are not attorneys or tax accountants. I know that might be news to everyone, but we are sharing information that should not be construed as legal or financial advice, and we always encourage businesses to consult those partners for guidance for their own organizations. So, on the phone from our team today, we have myself, Amanda Erickson, and Jeannie Valier from HRX Services. I will be presenting content, and Jeannie will be working to moderate and facilitate the chat and questions and answer sections of the webinar. Between the two of us, we hold certifications in PHR, SPHR, SHRM CP, SHRM SCP designations. Jeannie, would you like to say hello?
Well, I would absolutely love to say hello. I welcome everybody, and I'm excited to get going.
Thank you, Jeannie. We are also joined today by our colleague and friend, Mike Kohler, working through Elevate Virtual. I think some of you might know Mike, but Mike, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself and say hello?
I would, and I know that a lot of friends of the Elevate training program are already logged in, so gee, I wish I could be seeing you in person, but it's great to be gathered with you in this forum. To those who are new to the Elevate training program, Elevate Virtual is a by necessity offshoot of the normal training program that has training available from some of the top consultants on the Front Range in 3 curriculum tracks. This one happens to be HR, or workforce management, where HRX is, of course, one of our experts in that area. We also have communication and employee engagement as a curriculum track, and then leadership development. Again, this is Mike Kohler. I'm the Elevate coordinator, and I'll be in touch with you at a later date and suggest to you other resources that our Larimer County Economic and Workforce Development Department has for all businesses at no charge. So I'll be sure to tell you about all that. I want to say thank you, though, to Amanda and the HRX team and all of the faculty members of Elevate Training, because we pulled together, wow, on the fly, a public service initiative that will last through April, where all of the trainers are doing this training at no charge. And Amanda, I am just so appreciative of your generosity. And now we're counting on a fantastic webinar. So thanks very much, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Great, thank you, Mike. Thanks for also giving us the opportunity to connect with our community. We enjoy doing these things, and so yes, on the fly, very quickly, we've put a lot together, but thank you for all of your effort in supporting what we do as well. So with that being said, let's get started. First, let's do a little housekeeping. So I want to familiarize you a little bit with the tool we're using, just so that you can interact and participate as we walk through this session. So first, I'd like to draw attention to your tools box. Now, it may be hidden below, and you'll need to hover your mouse toward the bottom of the screen. When you do that, you will see this raise hand function as one of your options. So let's see who found the tools and the toolbox, and go ahead and click raise your hand if you found that box. Awesome, outstanding. Looks like we're all tracking pretty well here. That's great. So we'll also be using things like polling and other tools. So let's practice that right now. I'm going to enable the first poll totally for fun. And I am going to start that now. Jeannie, Mike, can you confirm that you can see this?
I can.
Great.
I see it.
I'll give us a few moments, let everyone make their decisions. Okay, outstanding. And I'm going to share with you, and you will be able to see the results. And it looks like we're a pretty healthy state here. A lot of water going on. Thank you for participating.
Has not appeared yet.
Oh, not yet. Okay, so let's see. Let's try one more time.
There it is.
Thank you. So once again, healthy state, great job. But I know that coffee happens to be Mike's favorite beverage of choice. So I think he's rooting for that as well. Wonderful. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. There's also a chatbot feature, which is similar to any other chat feature in any webinar you might have participated in. And I want to certainly let you know that you're welcome to participate there and ask questions. The team and I will do our best to moderate this area, but I want to direct you instead to the Q&A box. So using this box will allow us to engage there a little easier. In addition, we can pull reports from that so we can answer questions down the road. I want to note at this time that we are also hoping for some Q&A time out of this session, but that is also what our Thursday session will be set up for. So just for your reference, the next 4 weeks, we have a Tuesday content-based session like the one you're in today, and then a Thursday forum session where we can instead provide more communication and information around specific questions that you may have. Jeannie will be joining me on that panel discussion this Thursday. So please look for that sign up if you haven't already signed up for that, or if that's an interesting topic line that you'd be wanting to attend, in addition to what you're working through in this content-based webinar today. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to go through today. Our goals for the presentation, we'll start through a little bit of a timeline review, kind of where we've been, where we are, where we're heading. And then we'll look at the new normal and understand, what does that mean right now? What does that mean for businesses? What does that mean for HR folks? What does that mean? Of course, we're going to work through some of the compliance pieces, including both the federal and state mandates that have been and acts that have been enacted in the last couple of weeks. We'll kind of end with a focus and goal session, like what should we be looking at? What do I think that should be important to us to be thinking about at this time? And then we always try to leave with our webinars with something that we can take away. So I will be presenting the slides for your reference afterward, and send that along with the survey just so that you can provide some feedback to us. And in that, you'll have a list of resources so that you can look at them at your own leisure and follow up on some of the things that we're talking about today. Okay, let's get started. So first, let's talk a little bit about where we've been. So at the start of today, here's where we've come in a very, very short period of time. So I'll say starting December 2019, I think it was actually even the 31st of December, we started hearing initial reports, but we were seeing it was in Asia, so it was far away, but there's a new disease of sorts coming around. There were some confirmed cases, and then we started hearing about things like make sure you're getting good information and know where your resources are, worry less, and then make sure you're washing your hands, keeping distance, keeping home if you're sick, those types of things. They identified that the disease is a coronavirus. And then we start hearing probably in January, kind of early February, that there are some cruises and we have some isolation. And if you have a fever, stay home, self-quarantine for 14 days. But that's generally the communication that we're receiving. And then we move into about mid-February to about that first week of March. And during that time, we have a little more understanding of the disease, and we name it COVID-19. We identify that there's an at-risk population and people who should stay home. There's this concept of don't cause panic. There's communication around most likely that everyone will get it or most people will get it. So just be aware and stay informed. And again, get that good information. And at that time, we were getting this information from doctors, the government, CDC, World Health Organization. So I think we were tracking pretty decent dialogue from reputable companies and reputable sources. So I think when it came down to it, this really just hit us very quickly. Because of course, as you all are aware, as of March 9th, and I was just looking back in our information sessions in our blog posts to kind of get that timeline, but that week of March 9th, all of a sudden, about a span of a week, we go from just be aware and those at risk need to stay home to we're now closing schools and there's a public health emergency. We're talking about mandatory isolation or social distancing practices. There's this concept of no panic, but it's no panic buying, but this is serious. You can't find toilet paper and sanitizer anywhere. And our local, state, and federal governments are now stepping in, calling it a pandemic. We have mandatory stay-at-home orders and new laws and regulations. So where are we going to go in the future? Well, I think we're hearing now communication along the lines that we can anticipate this being a longer than a 2 or 3 week stay-home event. We're looking at schooling our children at home virtually. A lot of us are working remote. And we're seeing a lot of changing business functions. There's new opportunities for connection points. And we're trying to be creative and figure out what does the next new and the real new look like. So let's talk about that. And for that, we're going to start with another poll. So I'm going to direct you to computers once again. And you should see a new poll at this time. And give it a minute. Jeannie, can you confirm?
It is not there yet.
Okay. I'll try one more time.
There we go.
Thank you. And we'll give it just a few more minutes. And I'm going to go ahead and end the polling. And interesting stuff. I'll go ahead and share the results right now.
There it is.
Wonderful. And so it looks like for the most part, we have a lot of people working remote at this point. Not a big surprise. We've seen a lot of statistics showing that that has peaked, obviously, and spiked tremendously in the last few weeks. And then interesting to say, you know, we've got some people who think it's great working from home. It's okay. I have no idea. You know, hey, I hear that. Sometimes that's hard for me too. I'm an extrovert by nature, so it is challenging for me. And it's terrible. I mean, I get it. There's some challenging stuff happening with this. So let's talk a little bit more about that. And, oops, one more time. Close that down. Okay. So when we're talking about connecting remotely, let's talk a little bit about what that setup looks like. So teleworking is not easy for some people. I mean, some of us have been doing it for a while, and others have developed their own impromptu office just recently, right? In our basements or kitchen table. We have dogs and kids coming in, people on mute and not certain how to adjust their speakers or cameras. And, you know, there's a lot of grace happening there. Can you hear me now, for example, not just a Verizon tagline? So let's talk about some ideas on how to make this work maybe a little bit better. So first, let's talk about the tools and the things we're going to need. And some of these things are things that potentially you already do have, but let's walk through it regardless. So first, in our communication, we've got things like video conferencing, like we're using today, so Zoom. We've got instant messaging like Slack or Basecamp and certain types of collaboration tools. If you're not familiar with those are great resources to be able to stay in touch with your team. And then we've got instant chat functions like Google Hangouts and Jabber, if you're familiar with that as well. When we talk about working from home, I think a lot of people are concerned about accountability. So let's talk about some accountability. Task management, which includes tools like Asana, Trello, and you might have to implement a time clock of sorts. So we use Toggle in our organization. And then certainly a lot of people have that customer relationship management tool, like a Salesforce or something like that. And maybe that's something that you've had for a long time, but now we're talking about having to force adoption in certain areas, because you can't go down to John's office at the end of the office there and have a face-to-face chat about something that you needed to work through or to update on customers or something that's happening. So now we have to have some more of that forced adoption, because no one wants to work through 8 million emails just to try to make sure we're staying in touch. So again, some of those tools could be helpful. Scheduling tools, things that we're familiar with, like the calendar functions in Google and Outlook. But there are also scheduling tools, because once again, since we can't walk down to John and have a conversation in his office, we may need to be able to schedule some quick face-to-face time. And if you know what it's like to schedule with people, sometimes that can be a lot of emails back and forth and a lot of time wasted. So there are certain scheduling tools that offer an opportunity to plug into someone's calendar if they allow you to do that. Calendly is one of those tools. And then I really want to take some time and emphasize the importance for training and development. So not just virtual training like how do I do a webinar, how do I host a go-to meeting so that I can connect with my team members, but also training that maybe we had already set up that was going to be in person, things like manager training or harassment and discrimination. Those things now need to be looked at in a different way as well, and establish some virtual ideas on how do we do that and how do we engage people on a non-face-to-face basis. And then one of the best ways to make sure that you can force adopt a program or an application or a new way and a new process of doing things is certainly to provide some recognition and reward opportunities. So places where you can share with people what they're doing well and recognize them in front of their peers, because that's a great way to make sure that they're going to be bought in to what you're trying to do. So we definitely want to think about that. When you're thinking about all these tools and your structure, ask yourself, do you have a lot of experience or a little or none? Either way, likely the people that you're working with are a mix of experience at different levels. So again, having that training opportunity and some of these things in place could be helpful to make that work better. Now, we want to have a strong structure. So certainly this includes things like the physical hardware you need, computers, monitors, cameras, and all of those things. But it also includes things like developing good value systems and trust for your workforce, that they're doing what they need to be doing in remote work. Garnering leadership support is probably one of the biggest steps that you need to make sure you've tackled. And of course, cybersecurity. I mean, right now, this is a definite, it could be a really bad situation for some companies if we don't have our security on par, since you have remote workstations all over. And we need to have policies that support and outline how you want it to look. So while we have these options and these tools, I definitely want to make sure I really hone in on one point. And that is that, remember, software is not a solution in and of itself. It is a tool. You also need good processes in place to help connect all the dots. And so it's paramount that you also develop a structure that includes workflows and processes, and that you share that with the team so that they understand what their expectations are and the direction that you need them to move. If they don't have that, it feels very disorienting, and you're going to have people struggle. So let's talk about some things then that are apparent, or that maybe are not as apparent, but should be, in my opinion. And that thing would be flexibility. So setting expectations, and I mean like leaders to managers, managers to your employees, and team members to each other, it's okay to set reasonable expectations, timelines for when things should be done, what you're needing from each other, and it's really important to do so, especially when you add a new dynamic, like working remotely with a team that's not accustomed to that change. That said, all of that, we need a little grace, right? So we need this. We're not the same business dynamic we were in a few weeks ago. And this is an incredible fast change management that's happening for people. We are all experiencing change in professional and very personal ways. So some understanding and flexibility are the best things we can contribute right now. So some ideas for how to do that. Well, staggering schedules. People already are or will be working through schooling their kids at home for a period of time at some point in the future. We need to give your employees opportunities to work in and around their schedules as they see needed. There's also some built-in legislation around that and support for organizations as well, so it kind of goes hand in hand, to allow the employees the time they need and be flexible. The best way I think we always know is to provide a win-win for all parties involved. So let's talk about our connection points. When you're working virtually, virtual connection points are key. And so one of the things I like to try to point out is that it doesn't really matter how you're connecting, but have some intention behind it. So virtual connection points would be things like emails or blog posts, town halls for large organizations, especially, that might be really helpful. And then like contests and videos and something fun, like putting out some fun time as well. It just needs to be something that connects the team together and share what's happening so that everybody feel like they're on the same page. Now, one of the key components to that is really understanding how to engage your team. Making sure that you're adding these touch points, structuring video for face-to-face meetings, really make a focus on collaboration. So that way people not only understand what it is that they're doing, but they also understand the importance of what they're doing. I also encourage people establishing performance measurement. So how does this work? What are we monitoring? How can I be successful? Those are new questions now because we're in kind of a different environment and everything has shifted a little bit. So it's not a bad idea to just recircle back on those things. Expectations may have changed. What are our key productivity indicators or our KPIs now? Setting those requirements and making sure they're in alignment with what makes sense that's happening in our world at the moment is really important because that will help your employees understand the guidance they need for moving forward. And then one of the things that I always try to work with employees on and or clients on when we're talking about this concept is the concept of work-life harmony. I'm not a big fan personally of the idea of work-life balance. I know that's popular out there. When I think of that, I think of myself on a balance beam, and at any moment I'm going to fall off and squash my career or fall off and squash my family or something like that. So for me, I think of it more like a work-life harmony, like things intertwine a little more than they used to, and especially right now. So when that happens, we have to remind our people that they need to turn it off too. So remote working is always there. It's available. It's 24/7. And for some people, it is easy to slide into habits, which include working whenever you have some free time. Now, encourage your employees to structure their schedules as it works for both of you. And on some cases, you should do that because of the legislation that's around. But then stick to it. And you can always revisit the need to do something different down the road, but be sure to encourage boundaries for your people. It's really important right now. So, all of that being said, I'd like to see, by raise of hands, you show your hands, how many people feel like maybe now they could improve some of their remote working practices? And just so you know, I'm raising my hand too. Awesome. Okay, well, that's what we're here for, is just to try to learn some new things. So let's talk about change management in a little more detail. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tuckman's model, but I'm going to share it because I really enjoy this concept. I think it illustrates really well, and so I want to share with you. When change management occurs or something is changing in our dynamics and we're moving through things, I think that understanding how that works for people and how they work together is really important. And so I'm just doing this kind of reminder if you have seen this before. But first, what Tuckman said is he said, okay, so when you're putting a team together, and let's be honest, we're putting new teams together. And the reason that I say that is because you have people working in a different dynamic than they're used to. You have them in an environment that they're not maybe comfortable with, or maybe they're very comfortable in. And that's just going to create this new extra dynamic that's happening in our teams. Important also to note that we know sometimes our teams have changed. Some people aren't working with us anymore. And so their responsibilities are being shifted and changing. And hopefully at some point we're going to be able to pull them back in, and that's going to be changing and shifting, and things are just looking different. So we're in the forming stage, and the forming is I'm starting to learn who my team is. I'm starting to learn my own responsibilities. I'm trying to understand what it is that's required of me. When we move from forming, then we naturally go into a storming phase, which is now my technology doesn't work. I don't understand what I need to be doing. People aren't communicating with me. This isn't how it worked before. We start to hear some of those frustrations and conflict. And I know that Jana Sanchez does some great work on talking about how conflict isn't a bad thing. Like sometimes we need that. We need to be able to move forward through that. And so I think it's really important that we understand that as we're moving into building group dynamics and working together, there is going to be some natural rub, a little bit of natural conflict that occurs. But what healthy teams will do, and teams that understand that's going to happen and how we move through that, is they shift into what we call the norming area pretty quickly. And so they get into now I've got my routine, I've got my rhythm, I know what's expected of me, I have that understanding, I know where I add value and what our goals are all together. And I know that I contribute to that. And so having some of that understanding really helps move us into that norming phase. And if we're lucky, then we get into a performing where it just runs like a well-oiled machine, like we're just grooving together. And you know what I'm talking about because you've had relationships with people where that just fits well. It's like a glove and a hand, and you just move together very easily. And here's the thing is that when we start adding new dynamics, we start adding people back to our team, we're going to go back to forming. So just understanding that this is a cycle that just continues is really helpful for people to be able to move forward, at least in my opinion. So I try to throw Tuckman's model in when we talk about change management because I think it illustrates really well. And it helps us understand that when we're frustrated, that's kind of part of it, but we just need to find ways to move out of that. Okay, so let's talk about the legislation piece. So in response to COVID-19 and everything that's happening as a result of it, the government has put in place new regulations to ensure that people who need to be out of work because of COVID-19 related need, that they will be able to continue to earn money and support themselves and their families. So there's a few parts to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or FFCRA, but the employer-specific ones we feel you should know now include the following. Unemployment. So expanded unemployment options are available, but something to note is that you want to make sure that if you are having to go and lay some employees off, which we don't want to do, but if you are having to do that, that you're making them aware of employment options or the unemployment options that they have, and you should you need to change their status, again, put them on furlough, reduction of hours, or a layoff. The healthcare side, so they have included benefits related mandates so that every health plan, whether you're self-funded, fully insured, grandfathered, individual, exchange plans, all of them are going to be required to allow for COVID-19 testing, which is good. And for high deductible health plans, which a lot of people have at this point, the structure of the no-cost testing won't jeopardize the HDHP structure of the plan. So this is a good thing. There's also a tax credit component, which is used to pay for some of these programs. And for our understanding, that includes tax credits on a quarterly basis, at least what we've been told, to account for any funds used to supplement the paid leave provisions in the Act. Now, again, we're not tax accountants. We cannot give you advice on how this will work for individual businesses, but we do encourage you to reach out to your accounting teams with follow-up questions. And we think this is something you should definitely think about. Now, the two pieces that are really impactful are the paid sick leave and the Expanded Family Medical Leave Act. And so we're going to cover that next. So the paid sick leave, when we're talking about it, first, the purpose of it is to provide sick leave when it's required and you have a COVID-19 related need. Now, you have up to 80 hours of paid sick leave with this paid sick leave act or provision in the act. It is an employer paid benefit to employees, and it applies to employers with 500 or less employees. Now there's an exception, and we'll cover that in detail here in a little bit. The eligibility for the employee starts from day one of hire, and this starts tomorrow. So April 1st, 2020, and it goes through the end of the year. So there is a sunset clause on this that is designed to allow for employers to not be able to take, or employees and employers to not be able to have to administer this long term. It is just a temporary order. Okay, so let's talk about paid sick leave and when it applies. I know this is a fun chart, but I'm going to walk through it pretty quickly, and hopefully it will be a little bit helpful. So paid sick leave applies when an employee is unable to work or telework. Okay, so either one of those. And if it's for the employee's own condition, and they've really identified 6 different reasons, but for the employee's own condition, there are 3. And that is the employee is advised by the health provider to quarantine or isolate. The employee is experiencing COVID-19 related symptoms and is isolating, or the employee is subject to an order to quarantine or isolate. Now, when that occurs, the employee pay for their own condition, they're paid at their regular pay, and it's capped at $511 per day. And as far as the paid leave time available, they have 80 hours if they're full-time, and it's prorated for part-time workers. Now, according to the Act and some of the question and answers that have been released regarding it, a full-time employee is working 40 hours a week. Now, if the other reason that an employee would be unable to work or telework would be because they're caring for another person in the home, and those 2 really specific areas would be it's an individual in the house who's experiencing COVID-19 related symptoms and our employee is caring for that person, or it is a minor in the house and there's no childcare or school options available. Now, when that happens, the employee pay when they're caring for another is at 2/3 of their regular pay, and it's capped at $200 a day. And the paid leave time, again, still manages the 80 hours or prorated if they're not full-time. And then there's the 6th reason, which kind of is down in the end, which is any other substantially similar position that's released from the government. That's kind of ambiguous. I don't think that anyone really truly understands what that means or where the situations could be, but there is that 6th provision in, or 6th accommodation in the provision if we needed to. So let's talk about then after that paid sick leave or, a further consideration. So for example, if I have a child whose school is closed and I need to take care of them and there's a minor and they say that they are up to age 18, then I could take that first paid sick leave and then use the expanded FMLA. And let's walk through a little bit about what that looks like. So expanded FMLA is applicable if the child care or school is closed. And again, some of the same Qualifications are required. So the employer has 500 or less employees, the employee has been with the company for 30 days or more, and the employee is unable to work or telework from home. So then it may be possible. What is the leave? Well, you could have 12 weeks of job protected leave. The first 10 days are unpaid, but as I said, if you couple it with the paid sick leave, that is the design, is that the paid sick leave could cover that first 80 hours or 10 days in theory. Now, it is only paid at 2/3 of the employee's regular rate of pay. And the cap, again, is at $200 a day with a $10,000 aggregate pay total. So if you have a part-time employee, they do offer a calculation, which would include the average number of hours in the prior 6 months that you could then use to determine how much. And for job restoration, an employer with 25 or more employees, they would need to be restored to an equivalent level position, and employers with less than 25 employees are not required if the position is no longer available to restore that person to that previous position. Now, a couple of things just to note: FMLA still exists for employers with 50 employees or more and within 75 miles of locations. Again, if FMLA applied to you before, it does continue to do so here. FMLA can run concurrently with expanded FMLA, so you could have there could be an option for an employee to be out for a significant period of time. One of the things we have learned in the question and answers as well is that an employee can take leaves intermittently, and it's encouraged actually. So if you can have flexibility in how you work through your leave, like you could work Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the parents in the home have found a way to stagger their schedules, and so I can work Tuesdays and Thursdays, but then I need to take expanded FMLA for Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that it would be an opportunity and they would be able to do that. So again, that's a matter of just communicating with your employees, having some flexibility, and being able to establish that. Okay, so let's talk quickly about small business exemption. So this is also very recent, and essentially the way I understand it, at least, is that you have this provision here which says that if you have under 50 employees, that there is a small business exemption. And when we were asked, what does that small business exemption mean? They essentially have given us now these kind of 3 different ways or information around what the provisions are, or the reasons that you wouldn't have leave, or that you wouldn't be able to participate in the order or in the act. And so for doing that, they've given these informational pieces here, as well as how to qualify. So the leave is requested because the child's school or place of care is closed, or the child care provider is unavailable. The employer employs fewer than 50 employees. Again, that was a piece of that requirement. And an authorized officer of the business has determined that at least one of the 3 conditions described in question 58, which is here, is satisfied. So those are really the kind of points that they've given us now to help us understand how do we qualify for that exemption. And that's pretty new. So just something to note that that's out there now. So FFCRA, what it is not. I will tell you that at least in our community, there's been a lot of discussion. Some of the ways that we thought that this paid sick leave and expanded FMLA would be able to help and support employees and employers through this time. The question and answers have kind of come back and clarified some points that we did not understand fully. So some of those areas we're trying to share now, and that would be first, that a reduction of hours. So if you have a reduction of hours, these leaves are not available to employees with reduced hours, furloughed employees, or employees whose workplaces are closed. So further, stay-at-home orders. So these leaves are not available to employees whose workplaces are closed due to federal, state, or local shelter-in-place or stay-at-home orders, or due to business slowdowns. So Colorado is a stay-at-home order right now, and based on the question and answers, it is now saying that if you've had to reduce hours for an employee, for example, that employee would not be eligible for this paid sick leave. So what does that mean? Well, generally speaking, that your employee would still need to be able to work the regular scheduled hours that they had been working before, even if they're teleworking, even if you're doing flexibility and staggering it, in order to really qualify for this COVID-related need for leave. April 1st due date, there was initially some communication that maybe it would be April 2nd. We do have clarification. It starts tomorrow. And the employee's choice. So employees may not be required to use other forms of paid leave prior to or concurrently with paid sick leave or expanded FMLA. And this is different than FMLA, where you can require an employee to use the leave concurrently. So that's just something to note. And then one further thing that we have seen is that need for documentation, then, that the leave that you are paying for is going to be validated as COVID-19 need for leave, is going to be really important, we think, going forward. So again, just some things to understand. So as we're talking about requirements then, steps you need to be able to notify employees of these changes, there are some things we think will be helpful. So first, documentation. Be sure this is a virus-based response for leave. Having some type of documentation template is important. Work with your HR teams or your HR partners like HRX to help you draft it if you don't have one already in place. There's also notification requirements. There is an FFCRA poster that is now available. It must be posted by 4/1/2020, so tomorrow. It must be shared with all active employees, and all businesses that this applies to are required to post it. So what are those posting requirements? Well, we need to post in a conspicuous place on premises, which is interesting since most people are working remotely. So you can also email or direct mail the notice to employees. Those are options. And also posting on an employee information internal or external website like an intranet would also comply. That said, as a little tidbit or HRX thought, we do recommend getting a read receipt on the documents you send via email, especially if you didn't have an electronic disclosure notice signed by employees already allowing for you to communicate with them that way. This will help for documentation purposes. Okay, so that being said, let's do another poll. And you should hopefully see this poll now. Jeannie, can you confirm?
I can confirm that it's there.
Thank you.
Amanda, while everybody's taking this poll, we did have a question. Somebody asked, should HR require the same paperwork as the similar or as the same as FMLA, meaning going through the same notification process?
That's a really good question. And actually, there's been some communication around that some of that certification paperwork would be a good idea to have done. And then there's also some design around flexibility so that you are allowing your employees to take leave if they need that related leave. So some of the documentation that we've seen, for example, like a school closure, would be taking a picture of the notice that the school is closed, or having a document email or something that says that the school is closed just for your records. Jeannie, anything to add?
Additionally, I'd probably suggest that we follow the same notification process, designating the leave once you've begun that process. There's been a lot of FAQs and conversations around, do we follow the same exact process? Well, it'll be slightly different because the process is slightly different, the eligibility is slightly different, but we still want to designate the leave. We still want to keep track of the documentation. If it's the paid sick time that they're requesting, maybe you have some kind of form so that you can track and separate that from the normal sick time in terms of getting that tax credit on your quarterly filings.
Agree. But as far as some of the FMLA pieces are concerned, having the certification needs for it to be certified by a doctor could be challenging right now. So those are some of the things I think they're being a little
I definitely think they're definitely being lenient. They're taking more teledoc information, whereas you couldn't get to a doctor, or you're just not having any kind of doctor. You just know you're sick and you're qualifying it. But again, it's that constant communication with the employer and that collaboration piece.
Agree. And thank you very much. This is great. I will share the results back. Right, so there is a poster, absolutely, and glad that you're putting it together for those of you that haven't executed yet. As part of the documents that we'll share back with you, we do have a link to that poster and the Q&As as well, so there is some helpful information in that. But should you have any further questions, you are certainly welcome to reach out to myself or anybody at Elevate as well, and they can direct you to some partners that can be helpful. Okay, so I will go ahead and we are running into our last pieces. One also thing to note is that there is a temporary non-enforcement period. So up until March 17th, as long as the employer has acted in quote unquote good faith effort, which there is some conversation around what that exactly means, but as long as that you're not willfully neglecting providing this information, there is a little leniency for about 30 days from when the order was signed. So just something to note on that end. So
Amanda, we have one more question
go ahead.
about that piece. Someone asked if we're a small business under 50 and we're planning to file for the exemption, do we still need to hang the poster?
Yes, as far as I understand it, you do.
Agree. And there's really no paperwork, as the DOL has indicated, to file with them, but rather that you compile all the paperwork, maintain it, and have it ready and available should you have to present it at a later date.
Agree. Okay, so let's talk about our through April 12th. So we're at the stay at home right now. It's until April 11th. I'm sorry, April 11th, not April 12th. So unless you're doing an essential activity or work for a critical business in an essential position, you are really asked to stay home. This is a mandatory requirement. So this is for the state of Colorado. And I know that there's some challenges around what does essential activities include, and those things would be things like essential medical care, food and supplies, like getting food and supplies for yourself or your family or animals, household members, or if you're caring for a vulnerable member of the community, walking your dog or feeding animals, certainly something that I think would be good to continue doing if you can. I mean, we all need a little relief outside. And then other outdoor activities that you can engage in by yourself. So walking, running, hiking, those types of things. But anything that could break social distancing requirements are really prohibited. So we can't gather in a group, play basketball together, you know, those types of things. According to the government, they're really asking that we only go out if we're going out to provide essential products and services for a critical business or a critical government function. And it can be hard to figure out what is what is considered essential or critical. And so they actually have a really great list on the state site, really talking about the different critical businesses. There's quite a few of them, and includes things like grocery stores, gas stations, pharmacies, of course, police and fire stations, hospitals, garbage sanitation, but the full list is there. So if you do have any questions, I would reference that. So really just a quick show of hands. I'm just honestly, for curiosity's sake, how many people are working for a critical business out there right now? Wow, that's a lot of you. Well, thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I know that you're keeping us out and keeping us up and running, and I do appreciate that. Okay, so let's talk about CARES really quickly. We didn't have a lot built in for this, and the biggest reason is I think we're still really working through all of the dynamics, how things will work with each other, how payroll systems will work with the financial institutions, but we're going to tackle a little bit about it. So the purpose or the CARES Act is providing alternatives to closure and layoffs. And it really is designed to give employers the following options and benefits, which may allow them to stay open and keep more people employed. So the principal focus areas related to HR, which is kind of our focus, include financial impact, the unemployment expansion, healthcare needs, and then of course, individual needs. So kind of touching on those pretty quickly, we've got a financial assistance. So this would be outside of what is happening in the FFCRA Act. So this is specific to accounting and taxes. I would, again, direct you to connect with your financial advisor, payroll provider, or tax accountant to further understand when you might want to take advantage of this as your own organization is concerned. But certainly something we would encourage you looking into. Now, other than that, unemployment, some significant pieces. Unemployment compensation is increased. So our weekly benefit that we might have been able to take for typically up to 26 weeks has now expanded to 39 weeks, and we can add an additional $600 weekly to that benefit amount. Now this ends July 31st, 2020. So although the expansion ends further down the road with, regard to the 39 weeks and some other things, that actual just monetary increase will end at the end of July. The interesting piece is this does apply to self-employed people, contractors, gig workers, furloughed workers under COVID-19, and it is approved and managed by the states, and the DOL reimburse the states, so the state of Colorado still has to really administer this process. As far as healthcare response, so they've expanded telehealth services and additional assistance to hospitals and clinics, what I think we all can agree are necessary. And then, of course, we've all seen the rebates, the $1,200 per person, $2,400 for married couples, and $500 for children. According to our resources, they have said that that's determined using taxes from 2019 or 2018 if they're not available for 2019. And certainly adjustments may be made after 2020 filings. There are also additional reductions based on income, exceeding certain levels. And again, I would reference that act to really understand what those levels may be for your specific instance. So as we're moving toward the end here, let's talk about our goals. So I would say first, keep it HR, right? Confidentiality is still important as we work through these unprecedented times. And this means HR best practice is still a requirement. Areas that will and could and may be impacted, areas like HIPAA, ADA, and GINA. So these are all really related to keeping people's health information and personal information and disability information private. So one of the things that we're asking, can we take employees' temperature at work? Well, that is allowed. But can I ask an employee, did your family member test positive for COVID-19? Probably not the way I should be asking that. Instead, we want to say something, have you or has anyone around you tested positive for COVID-19? So we need to protect and be focused on that confidentiality piece. That is important. And as we're going through this discrimination, this remains true. We need to be careful of how we're treating our community people. And the EEOC and Colorado Anti-Discrimination Acts are still very much in place. So keep that in mind when we're hiring, terminating, or working with employees. The IRS has allowed for some leniency and the new Form I-9. So typically needs to be done face-to-face. You need to be able to certify that you're seeing that person in front of you. They have been and relaxed a little on this, but that doesn't mean that you can't, as soon as we're ready to go back to work, you need to make sure you go back and do that physical verification. And then CDLE in the state of Colorado, the new comps order and Equal Pay for Equal Work Act are still needing to be prepared for. So if you have not done compensation work in your organization, this is an important step you should consider for this year. These pieces of legislation have significant impacts on how you work with your compensation ranges in your organization. And all of these things are important to consider as we're working through these challenging times. But let's remember, everything we're focusing on as business leaders, we're focused on making sure we can continue to keep people employed, ensuring success of the business and moving forward. But let's talk about what we need to do. We need to support our community. We need to support our families. And that means checking in, having virtual meetings, coffee breaks, and virtual happy hours. I had one last Friday. It was great. So just different things that we need to do. And of course, supporting our employees. So one of the most important things that I look at is we're seeing adopting new strategies, new delivery models. Teams are learning and laughing at working remotely. And business conduct and professionalism are still there, but they're kind of changed a little bit. So picture this. 2 weeks ago, I had meetings with colleagues from the insurance world. And of course, they were dressed in suits, much like the gentleman on the left. And this past week, I had 2 go-to meetings with my friends in insurance businesses, and they were dressed much more like my friend on the right here. So we have seen, and I think we can understand that. It'd be funny to be at home and watch someone in their 3-piece suit engaging in a go-to meeting on video camera in their basement. We can appreciate that. And I think these are things that are giving us opportunities to change how we perceive the professional and the workplace in general. So the good news is we're all in this together. We'll be better together and stronger when we come out. There is an end. It may not be clear when it will be, but we have proven as people that we'll make things happen and come out stronger for it. So I think there's testing is starting to happening, communities are banding together, and nations are connecting to be able to move forward. So let's definitely keep this positive. Certainly that's what we try to do here. As predicted, I knew we would run right to the end, so we don't have really much time for the Q&A. Thank you, Jeannie, for inserting where we could. Jeannie will be my guest panelist on Thursday this week at 2 p.m. So if you're interested in participating, it will be very just question and answer. She and I back and forth, kind of hypothetically talking about, well, what about this and what about this? It's really designed to be interactive so that we can try to answer questions to the best of our knowledge. I would again like to remind you we are recording this session, and we will send a copy of the recording along with the slides for your review and a survey asking about how we did. I also want to remind you that we are not attorneys or tax accountants, and none of what we have shared today should be perceived as such, and we will always recommend getting final guidance from your partners in those areas. Last but not least, this is the links that you will see to some of the things we've talked about today, but we do appreciate your time. And with that, Mike, I will throw it back to you in case you want to close this out.
Well, thank you. And I say that to everyone who's participating, because in these strangely distant times, it's really informative and fun to get together in the best ways that we can. And a big, big thank you to Amanda as my little...
Mike, are you still there?
Oops, sorry.
Okay.
I was going to say, I can't imagine anyone doing a better job of conducting the webinar. So thank you. And you will all hear from me. Thank you for receiving and reading our messages to you. And we're at our department ready to help you.
Great. Thank you once again. We appreciate everyone's time. I wish you healthy and stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you very much.